But for Governor Bush, he had Connie Rice as National Security Advisor, Colin Powell as his Secretary of State. I was his counsel. We had some strong people, talented people that were diverse on the president's staff and then on the governor's staff as well. So he was someone that really appreciated the fact that talent comes in all shapes and sizes, in all colors. And I really admired that about him and all of us who worked for him.
Hello again, and welcome to today's episode of Stories from Real Life. I'm your host, Melvin E. Edwards. Thanks for joining me on this week's Learning Adventure. Our guest today is the Honorable Alberto Gonzales. Hello, sir. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. It's good to be on your show.
Thank you for being here. Mr. Gonzales was one of the featured speakers at last weekend's Principals First Conference in Washington, D.C., which had to be evacuated on Sunday because of a, quote, credible bomb threat by someone claiming to be white nationalist. Though you were there on Saturday, so you missed out on all the fun on Sunday.
And a very unfortunate incident, but we're not going to be deterred from making sure the truth gets out as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, same here. We will not be moved. So I was on staff at Lieutenant Governor Rick Perry when Texas Governor George W. Bush appointed you to the Texas Supreme Court.
Yes.
I remember that ceremony because of how emotional and proud W was of you. What do you recall from that day?
Well, fortunately I have a tape, and it was rather surprising and very moving. Yet obviously he was very proud. It was a proud moment for my family, of course, but I think it was also a proud moment for him. And he's just a wonderful human being, and I thought he was a great governor and an even better president. And some days I'm sure people are thinking, I wish we had W back in the White House.
Even some of his critics, I think, would have a second opinion of him now.
That's correct.
So I think he hired you for like 5 different jobs. So he made you his governor's general counsel and Secretary of State, then Texas Supreme Court, then President's general counsel in Washington, and then finally the Attorney General of the United States. How did you first meet George W. Bush?
I met him in a connection with a campaign rally when his dad was first running for president in '88. We really didn't get to know each other. And then later on when he was running for governor, I set up a campaign event at my law firm in Houston. And so we obviously knew each other. When he asked me to be his general counsel, I asked him, Governor, why me? You really don't know me that well. There are 50,000 lawyers in Texas. You could have asked any of them, why me? And he told me this story back in 1988 when his dad was first running for president. I helped on the campaign just a little bit. But anyway, they identified me as maybe an up-and-comer. And they invited me to Washington to interview for some positions in the 41 administration. They were like in HUD, Commerce, and Veterans Affairs. Fairly junior level because I was a young lawyer, but I wanted to set my firm and make partner. I would have been the first minority partner in our firm in its storied history, and so I said no. So fast forward to Austin, Governor Bush says, you turned down my old man for a job. He says, that's how you first got on my radar screen. And I was amazed that he knew that story. It was the first example of what I learned about him, and that is he has a remarkable memory for people and faces and stories. And I think it's what made him such an effective politician, quite frankly. So I went to work for him. We're very different. He's extroverted like his mom. I'm introverted. He's the son of a president. I'm the son of a construction worker. And I think he genuinely liked my story. I think he felt it was the American story. And we just got along very, very well. And he gave me several once-in-a-lifetime opportunities.
That's pretty special. So this sentence that I'm about to say is going to prove I'm from Texas. So people from outside of Texas won't understand, but I know you will. How often do you think about your humble beginnings that you had growing up in the Houston suburb of Humble?
I think about it often in that, my mom still lives in the house my dad built in in that community outside of Houston, North Houston. Still lives in that same house, and she is 93. Hopefully, I'm going back to Texas every year for the past 5 years. I go out to Sam Houston State University in Huntsville and spend the day there speaking to students and members of the community there about leadership and things of that nature. So I always make time to spend time with my mom during those visits. It's a wonderful opportunity. So I look forward to seeing her in a few weeks. So she's fairly elderly, and I know that I won't be spending too many more trips with her, and I'm really looking forward to this particular one.
That's pretty special. So, what goes through your mind when you hear this current administration using deportations and threats of ending birthright citizenship?
Well, I think the threats of ending birthright citizenship. The first question is there legal authority to protect people that are born here in this country? There was a Supreme Court decision about this many years ago. I feel it's fairly controlling. However, that case was unique in that the person that was adjudicated to be allowed to stay here wasn't some kind of legal status, as I recall, perhaps as a naturalized citizen. I don't remember, but it's not like this person was here in totally unlawful status. So there is that slight discrepancy. Nonetheless, the language is pretty clear that people born in this country are citizens of this country. So if I had to bet money, I would bet that the court's going to come out on the side of, if you're born in this country, you are an American citizen. But again, the court has never definitively ruled definitively on this particular facts of the case.
All right. So, as you mentioned, as was George W. Bush's belief, that your story is the American dream. Your parents had a second and a sixth grade education, yet
Yes.
you went to Rice University and Harvard Law School.
Yes.
So did you ever hang out at Willie's Pub on campus at Rice and just wonder why this was your life?
Oh, I think we all, those of us who enjoy good fortunes in our lives, always kind of look back and say, why? Why did this happen? But I think the time is better spent taking advantage of your free time and to think about, okay, what can I do because of my good fortune? What is it that I can do to improve our community, to improve our country? So I like to spend my time thinking about that. I'm very proud of my accomplishments. I have to be candid with you, but I'm more proud about the lives that I've touched. People have gone on to do great things. Brett Kavanaugh was the first lawyer I hired in the counsel's office, and he's now in the U.S. Supreme Court. Every morning when I was the Attorney General in my senior staff meetings, Neil Gorsuch was a young lawyer, and he would be in those meetings, and now he's on the U.S. Supreme Court. And many other the lawyers that I worked with in Washington have done great things. Evan Young he's on the Texas Supreme Court currently, and Evan was just a baby sort of intern when I was the Attorney General, and now he's on the Supreme Court. So it's so gratifying to know that you made some difference perhaps in their lives, maybe inspired them, motivated them. Obviously, they've all been successful because of their own hard work. There's no question about that. But to see those kinds of success stories to me are really gratifying.
Yes, that's awesome. So when you were the governor's general counsel, you had the task of reviewing all death row clemency cases in Texas, including the famous one with Carla Faye Tucker. Did you feel a sense of frustration knowing that in some ways you had less authority than the state's parole board, yet had to take all the blame for that?
Oh, no, I really didn't, because as a lawyer, you realize what your role is. And clearly, my relationship with the governor at that time was very strong, and I knew exactly what he looks for in making clemency decisions. And we looked at hundreds of clemency petitions for pardons. Obviously, the death penalty cases were very serious. I took those cases very seriously. He struggled with it because of the fact that she was a woman, a born-again Christian, and because of the claims that she was a born-again Christian and the fact that she was a woman, I actually went to visit her to speak with her about a religious conversion. And I went back after speaking with her to talk to the governor and told him, well, I do believe based on what she told me, that she's had a religious conversion. In the end, Governor Bush decided that that a lot of people have religious conversions right before they're about to be put to death, and he just didn't feel it would be fair to spare her because she was a woman. There was a big push to spare her because of that, and he just felt he had so much confidence in our criminal justice system. Although it is flawed, it's not perfect. He had confidence in it and just didn't feel it would be appropriate to intervene in that particular case. But all the death penalty cases were very, very serious, and he expected me to look at them carefully because he depended on me to give him advice as to whether or not clemency was warranted.
Okay, so Bush announced his plans to seek the presidency in 1999, and that was on the heels of some hot topics in Texas politics. As I mentioned, there was a Carla Faye Tucker execution that took place in early 1998, and then later that year, we had the gruesome James Byrd lynching out in Vidor, Texas. What do you recall about those days behind the scenes?
Well, obviously, I had a lot more involvement in the Carla Faye Tucker execution because it required a gubernatorial decision. I don't remember that much about the Byrd situation, but I know it was I remember it was very, very troubling for the governor. Obviously, no one should be treated like that, no matter the circumstances. And I don't remember now how personally involved the governor got. Maybe I should go back and look at my history. But he was someone that valued diversity, and today, efforts to help people of color are being attacked. Certainly, this administration has a different view about the value of diversity in all levels of our government and in our society. But for Governor Bush, he had Connie Rice as National Security Advisor, Colin Powell as his Secretary of State. I was his counsel. We had some strong people, talented people that were diverse on the president's staff and then on the governor's staff as well. So he was someone that really appreciated the fact that talent comes in all shapes and sizes, in all colors. And I really admired that about him. And all of us who worked for him appreciated the opportunities that he gave to all of us, because he didn't have to, but he did. And I'm very, very grateful for that.
So I just thought of this question as you were talking. How would you react to, let's say, the current administration labeling Bush's staff as DEI hires, being one of those minority candidates and knowing how qualified everybody was?
Well, I just, with all due respect, would say that's how stupid they are. Let's just evaluate the talent side by side with the people that he's appointed to key. This current president has appointed to key positions. I'd match up Don Rumsfeld with Pete Hegseth. There's no question about it. I'd match up Colin Powell with Marco Rubio, but he happens to be Hispanic, and I give credit to President Trump for that. So I look at the talent that surrounded President Bush, and I'd match up our team any day with the team that currently exists in Washington.
Yeah, I just thought of the transportation secretary with Elaine Chao matched up against Sean Duffy, for instance.
Absolutely. So we had, Norm Mineta. He was also
yes.
Rod Page, first education secretary from Houston. So we had a strong team.
Yes, I agree. So, what was your job like as the U.S. Attorney General when compared to what you left in Texas?
Oh my goodness. I'm often asked the question of all the things that I've done, which job did I enjoy the most, which was the most rewarding and satisfying. And while it's a tremendous honor to be a cabinet secretary, to be the Attorney General of the United States, it's an incredibly difficult job, because you're going to be involved in difficult decisions where there are always going to be winners and losers. And, you have to go to the Hill to testify. You have to participate in oversight hearings. You have to do all media interviews all the time to justify decisions that are made by people at the Department of Justice. And I might go a week or so without talking or seeing the president. As White House counsel, I saw the president virtually every day, during the week. I was surrounded by a team of very talented lawyers. We had a staff of about 14 lawyers, and we worked on historic issues. 9/11 happened when I worked in the White House, and you talk about historic legal issues, we had to deal with them. So if you're an American citizen, as I said, going to work every day at the White House, it just doesn't get better than that. Being in Washington this past weekend and walking around the White House, first of all, I'm saddened by all the security wiring and things that are now surround the White House. When we were there, we could walk virtually up to the black iron rod gates of the White House. But watching everyone to get their picture taken in front of the White House and thinking to myself, I used to work there every day for 4 years. What a special privilege and treat that was. So again, great being the Attorney General, managing I think a $30 billion budget, thousands and thousands of employees stationed around the world. But in terms of pure fun and joy, and being to work closely with someone that I know well, I consider a friend, it just doesn't get any better than that.
That's incredible. That is really incredible. So, what was the best part about your job as Attorney General?
The best part about my job as Attorney General, that is a good question. All the interactions with the cabinet secretaries as the Attorney General, all the agencies would have legal issues, and they would bring those legal issues to the Department of Justice, and so there would be communications with the other cabinet secretaries. I loved working with that group of individuals. Very, very talented, as I spoke about earlier. That is the best part. Then, of course, being able to spend the time that I could spend with the president, going over to the White House. I wouldn't say as often as I certainly not as often as I did when I was a White House counsel in terms of having contact with the president. But those trips over to the White House, and the other thing I enjoyed most, every morning I'd be picked up in my home by two black Suburbans, FBI Suburbans with FBI agents carrying machine guns. And we would drive immediately over to the FBI building. And I began my workday every morning getting a security briefing with the FBI director, Bob Mueller. Bob and I became close because of that. And so I would say that was also very special to me to receive those national security reports, having the opportunity to talk to Bob Mueller and trying to understand what are the issues the FBI was dealing with that particular moment. The FBI, DEA, Marshal Service, ATF. I mean, just a number of law enforcement agencies that report up to the Attorney General. But probably the most important is the FBI, and so I really enjoyed those mornings with Bob Mueller.
So that was the best part. What was the worst part about being an Attorney General?
Well, you're blamed for everything, whether or not anything that happens in the department, and that's the way it should be. You're the head of the department. You're responsible for everything that happens there. You hold accountable though those who are actually responsible, but nonetheless you have to answer for them before Congress and before the American people. We had some tough times. We made some pretty tough legal decisions when I was White House counsel, and John Ashcroft was the Attorney General. But when I became Attorney General, those decisions made on the war on terror, they all got for some reason got percolated up to the Congress, and because I'd been involved as White House counsel, I was sort of viewed as the person responsible for all the legal decisions, which it wasn't true. But nonetheless, you accept that responsibility, and so you try to deal with it the best you can. We had an issue with the removal of 5 U.S. attorneys, all who had served their statutory 4-year term. They served at the pleasure of the president. The president could freely remove them if he wanted to. And so, quite honestly, when I think about what happened, the controversy over that compared to what's happening today with people being fired from the Department of Justice, it's almost comical, quite frankly. But anyway, it's never tough to have to go up to Congress and, participate in a hearing where you're being accused of doing something that perhaps was improper. And you have to defend yourself because it's all about defending the department. One U.S. attorney described it this way: the Attorney General of the United States is the moat around the castle, and the castle is the Department of Justice. And your number one responsibility as the Attorney General is to defend the department, defend the personnel of the department. And so that's what you do. You go up to the Hill, you defend the department. because everyone who works there is depending on you to do that.
Do you miss public life?
I do. Walking around this weekend, I realize how much I miss it. What I do today, I'm in academia, and I teach. I teach the next generation of leaders is the way I like to tell myself. But probably the three best jobs, legal jobs in America, is to be White House counsel, Attorney General, or Supreme Court Justice. So 2 out of 3 isn't bad, right? But yeah, I miss it because that's why I went to law school, to be involved in monumental historic decisions and to make a positive difference. And I had that opportunity. I got to do that.
Wow.
You don't do it perfectly. You make mistakes. If you don't think the President of the United States doesn't make mistakes, you just have no idea how difficult these decisions are. Even when the president's surrounded by the best and the brightest, you're going to make mistakes sometimes, and we certainly did that. But gosh, it was rewarding.
In your wildest dreams, could you have ever imagined you would have accomplished what you have?
Of course not. No, growing up, I wanted to be a baseball player. That was my dream. And then later on, when I realized I didn't have the talent, I wanted to be a pilot. And I went to the Air Force Academy a couple of years. That wasn't going to happen. My eyesight turned bad. So then I decided I want to go to law school and see what was going to happen. And I thought I would. I went to work for a big firm in Houston when I graduated from. I went to Harvard Law School, and I thought I would be there the rest of my life. But then after about 13 years, I realized, okay, I've got a great life in Houston, but there's something's missing. And so when Bush is elected governor and he asked me to come on board, I thought, okay, this will be something different, and I'll do it for a few years, was what I told my wife. We'll just do it for a few years, and we'll come back to Houston. But once I got up to Austin, I realized how much fun it was.
It's fun sometimes. I didn't have I didn't have the kind of responsibility you have. I'm a writer, and I was a speechwriter for Rick Perry. So I was behind the scenes. Nobody knew who I was. much
Oh, some
different from
people knew
yours.
who you were, I'm sure. Are you kidding? I mean, those words, what the governor says, what the president says, and those are all very, very important. They're certainly important to the people of Texas, and they're important obviously to the principal.
Yeah. Speaking of words, your book is called "True Faith and Allegiance: A Story of Service and Sacrifice in War and Peace." It was released in 2016. It's over 500 pages, and that's a lot of words. Is there is there anything that you left out that you wish you had added, or vice versa?
Well, there were things that were in the book that had to come out because I had to have it cleared by the National Security Council, and so there are things that they would not let me print that I wrote about. No, I think I tried to be as honest as I could about my experiences growing up in Houston, my time at Vincent and Elkins in Houston, and then of course my time in Austin, and then my time in D.C. And I talk about all the controversies and again, the tough times. I tried not to shy away from it. I think it was important to for the readers to know that it's not always sunny. It's sometimes it gets cloudy, and you just have to be ready for it. I tell my students, how important it is to spend part of your professional life in public service. That you have a lifetime to make money, so spend part of it in public service, giving back. But you go in with your eyes open and your armor on, because the higher you go in terms of responsibility, the more difficult it is. It's unfortunately it's a political world, very much so today, and you just have to accept that you're going to be treated unfairly, covered unfairly by the media sometimes, and that's just the way it is. And all you can do is, when given the chance, is explain your actions, explain your decisions, and knowing that if you acted, with integrity, you accept the criticism and you move on. That's just the way it is. Because the next big decision is waiting right outside your door, and you've got to be ready for it. You've got to be able to move on. One of the things I really admired about Bush is he was a decision maker. We would give him good information, because he surrounded himself with really talented people. And he would take the information and then make a decision, and then he moves on and doesn't agonize over it. You can't second guess yourself because, as I said, the next big decision is waiting right outside the Oval Office door. And I learned from that, watching him, the way that he made decisions, and that has helped me in terms of my decision making.
During those times when you felt like you were unfairly characterized by the media, how did your family respond? You told me how you responded. How did your family react to it?
It was tough. My wife. I think it affected the kids. My kids didn't want to become lawyers, and I think part of it may have been because they saw what their dad went through. But I tell people that if I were asked today to go work in a senior position in Washington, what would I say? On the one hand, I would say, hey, when your country calls because your country needs you, you try to find a way to answer the call. On the other hand, my wife wouldn't let me do it. I mean, I think she's had enough of it. But I'll give you an example that I love to tell about responding to service, a call to service. When I first became White House counsel, I had to find a deputy, the deputy White House counsel, and I talked to various folks. Several people recommended that I hire a guy named Tim Flanagan, who had clerked for Warren Burger, had worked at the Department of Justice in a senior level, and they said he's a man of great talent. And so I interviewed Tim. I really liked him. We got along well. But he called me back after the interview to tell me that he couldn't do it because, well, first of all, he has 14 kids. He's a Mormon, has 14
Wow.
kids. And he said, I just can't afford to do this. And I was really disappointed. But a few days later, he called me back and said, and I talked to my wife, you're asking me to come serve the President of the United States. We will sacrifice and do that. And so Tim came on board, and he's terrific, man of great integrity and talent. And so that I often tell that story as an example of, it's a sacrifice to come work in these positions. I mean, it's a lot of fun, very challenging, but it is a sacrifice in particular for the family. And people need to understand that when they start, second guessing and criticizing decisions and the work of people that work in government.
All right, I just have a couple more questions as we start to wind down this conversation. So I know that you've got a milestone birthday coming up this August. I won't tell people which one. You can tell them if you want, but I'm not going to say which one.
Oh, I'm happy to. They can look it up, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to turn 70, which is just hard to believe that I'm going to be 70. It's funny. I still think that I've climbed my first mountain. I think David Brooks is the one that wrote the book about the second mountain, climbing a second mountain, and I still think there's something God has left for me to do, and so I'm waiting to see what that looks like.
Okay, that's forward looking. So looking back, because having milestone birthdays causes people to become nostalgic. How do you want your legacy to be viewed?
Oh, I think, I alluded to this early in this conversation. It's about the people whose lives I affected. Look, I'm proud of the things that I've accomplished and the positions I've held, but I'm more proud of the people that I've worked with, the things that they're doing now, on the bench and around the country, general counsels of companies, things of that nature. So I'm very, very proud of that. And still today, I run into them as I travel around the country, and we always reminisce about the good times. They always refer to me as Judge. I never like to be called General because I was in the military, and the highest rank I got to be an Airman First Class, two-striper. So it just felt weird to be called General because of that experience. I prefer to be called Judge, and so I'm always referred to as Judge. And we always have. It's always good to reconnect with people. My legacy, I hope, will be all those talented individuals that our paths have crossed, and they go on to do bigger and better things, more important even than the things that I've done. That's my legacy.
That's pretty special. So, all right, so for my last question today, can you get W to come on my show?
No, I don't think so. I mean, he just, a lot of people have been just trying to get him to take a position in politics, but it's not his style. He's done his thing. He wouldn't have liked it if, while he was president, someone was critical of him, a former president. There were a lot of people critical of him, but he wouldn't have liked it if a former president had said something negative. The thing is, it's because you don't know what you don't know when you criticize someone, a decision. There are things you just don't know unless you have a security clearance and you're right there. So he shies away from making public comments. So even if I could get him to do this show, I'm not sure he would give you any information that would relate to what's going on today in this country. And there's a lot going on in this country.
You can tell him we talk about baseball. He and I have actually talked about baseball before when he was governor and I worked for Rick Perry. So I remember sitting in his office and looking at all his baseball books, and we started a conversation about that.
I know.
If he wants to talk about baseball, I'm willing to limit it to just baseball talk.
Yeah, well, he should be happy. I mean, the Rangers are just, I guess, 2 years removed from a World Series championship. So it's, I'm a Houston Astros fan because I grew up in Houston.
Same here. I was going to say we won't talk about the Rangers because I'm an Astros fan.
Okay, yeah, me too. I'm afraid they're not. Yeah, and they lost Tucker and they lost Bregman this offseason. I don't expect much from them this year, but we'll wait and see.
It's going to be interesting. I think their offense is going to be better than people are expecting. Well, especially the power numbers. I think with Paredes and Walker on the infield, I think they're each going to hit 30 home runs.
Are you kidding?
I am dead serious, and I'm expecting a bounce back from Pena. I'm expecting him to hit 18 to 20. So wow. if we can get,
but we have no pitching. Do we?
We have young pitching, so it's unpredictable. And the thing that I saw towards the end of last season, if they can carry that over to this season, I'll feel really comfortable. But the thing with young pitching is they can still have that roller coaster, and so they can be unreliable sometimes. But I'm optimistic about the season.
Okay, well maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. That'll be great.
Well, all right, we'll meet back here in October. We'll talk about them playing the Rangers or somebody else in the playoffs and going to the World Series.
Okay, that'd be great.
All right. Looking forward to it. Our guest today has been former U.S. Attorney General Alberto Gonzales. Thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story with my audience.
Thank you for having me.
If you don't already follow me on Spotify or some other podcast platform, I would appreciate it if you would do that now. And please share this episode with anyone you think would be interested. That's it for today's episode of Stories from Real Life. Join us again next time for another chance to learn from each other. Until then, don't forget to shine your light wherever you go.